We're not in competition with anybody. We're here to support everybody and to act as an advocate for issues that we as small firms face both in the business world and with the Institute. Most of the people that I want to introduce and welcome and thank aren't here right now. But I would like to thank Vice President of the Institute, Pam Loffelman. Where is Pam? Pam has been on every one of our conference calls. Pam is the one who got us this room today. Pam is the one who got us staff people. Pam is the one that, when there were no funds available at the AIA, managed to get the AIA to open some doors to make this possible. Pam has done everything that we could have asked in behalf of the Small Firm Roundtable to get this going. Webinar is another thing that Pam got us going with. Another one that was very instrumental to this, is not here right now, is past President Marvin Maleka. He was the one who appointed me and wanted to make sure that small firms did get a voice in the Institute. And I recognize I don't see anybody else from CRAN or SPP here now, and at this point, we'll turn and start the program.
As Jeffrey said, Michael led the Small Firm Task Force in 2005, and he's here to give us that historical perspective on that.
Thank you, Jane, for the introduction. As was mentioned, in 2006, I chaired a task force at the request of Doug Steidel, the president of the Institute. And it was in response to a member convention resolution that the Institute start doing better things for the small practitioner. My wife says architects can't talk without props. I'm going to try and prove that's wrong because my PowerPoint and I have had a malfunction. In the task force was not my byproduct. It was the work was the byproduct of Miguel Rodriguez from here in Los Angeles, Karen Harris, Kevin Harris, David Sumners, and Jane Frederick, who's going to be carrying on the impetus to it on the executive committee for the new Small Firm Roundtable. It was given 3 charges by the AIA. The first charge was define what a small firm is. The second charge was determine the needs of a small firm. And the third charge was to recommend AIA responses to those needs. So the first charge, as I say, was to define what a small firm is. And we tried to figure out whether it was project-related, organizationally related, was it quantitative in some fashion, or was it just a self-declared? So we looked at a bunch of characteristics. We looked at gross billings, billings per employee, the type of projects, the size of projects, the diversity of the practice. And we also looked at the legal structure, the number of owners, the number of employees, the ratio of support staff to technical staff, the duties of the owners of the company, and the whole series of other things, benefits offered. We looked at geographic characteristics. Where were the firms located? Or is it only small towns that have small firms? And the conclusion of the first of the 3 charges we got from the AIA was that there were no hard definers of a small firm. There were some substantiating traits. They included, there were seldom more than 2 or 3 owners. There was the hierarchy of responsibility within the firm was either simple or non-existent. Business models were frequently based on intuition. There was often an area of specialization. Small firms virtually were never prime in very large projects, and that self-declaration was an important aspect. So in response to the first of the 3 charges, Jane and I and the rest of the committee came up with the definition that a small firm is generally characterized as having 2 or 3 owners, designing small to medium-sized projects, usually in their local or geographic region. Often small firms focus on specific project types or have specialized expertise. These owners usually have multiple responsibilities in their firms, and there is frequently an absence of a defined business model. Also, they're largely, as I said earlier, self-defining. The second of our charges from the Institute was to identify the needs of the small firm. This task force in 2006 identified 5. They said they were models, tools, information, advocacy, and camaraderie. So if we touch on those briefly, the models that would be beneficial to small firms, the task force thought, were business models, project delivery models, and peer review opportunities. The possible tools available to the small firm included insurance benefit programs, specially tailored AIA contract documents, and a database of details, sort of an upgrade of graphic standards for the 21st century and something that had that kind of universal applicability that graphic standards had a half a century ago. Under the third of the tools that were thought to be needed by small firms was information. And here it was advice on practice and business issues, support staff training, assistance with staff development beyond IDP, and case studies. The fourth of the 5 tools that the task force identified was advocacy on behalf of the small firm. And here the goal was, the task force felt, to remove the stigma of the small firm and to find a way of establishing a champion for the small firm within the AIA. That's something that President Malika did, I think, started along the way with the creation of the Small Firm Roundtable. The final one, the 5, was camaraderie. And that was just the feeling that of the tools, there needed to be more networking opportunities for small firms. So from the tools, we were then asked to make recommendations of possible AIA response. And this, I would hope, these 7 recommendations might provide some opportunities for some interesting discussion in the next few months amongst the Small Firm Roundtable people. The ones that were presented to the National Board in 2006 were 7. The first recommendation was to expand the research to better understand the small firm, that we as an institute really did not have a clear handle on it, as our loosey-goosey definition suggested. Research should include benefits offered, insurance carried, billings, legal structures, profitability, staff characteristics, services offered, that kind of thing. So we felt that there was first recommendation that we needed as an institute to continue our research into the small firms. The second recommendation was to improve the support of the small firms by the AIA Contract Documents Program. That second recommendation suggested the Institute consider some kind of a letter form of agreement in the next document families, and to ensure that the pricing structure for the electronic documents provides equitable and fairly priced access for all AIA members to the documents. So our second recommendation of that task force related to the contract documents. The third related to insurance issues, and it was that we recommended that first, the AIA better publicize the offerings of the AIA Trust to support small firms, and the second was to aggressively seek to create new ways to furnish programs that benefit and meet the needs of small firms. And I know we're going to be talking about insurance later, so it's no more needed on that. The fourth of the 7 recommendations was that the AIA establish a curriculum approach to the AIA convention, setting up clearly defined special programs for small firms, easily identified, and to publish the existence to new and potential members. The fifth of the recommendations was to consider the reconstitution of what was then the small project practitioner knowledge community to focus specifically on small firms. The sixth of the 7 recommendations was to establish a mechanism for monitoring future AIA progress to better supporting small firms. These options might include small firm representation on the board, designation of an ExCom member with a specific part of their portfolio to address and monitor small firms, require annual reporting by the knowledge community to the board, and then finally we just said staff should be directed to also come up with their own thoughts on it. And the 7th of the recommendations was to undertake a separate study into the needs of the sole practitioner, because there was felt that there was differentiation in the model between the sole practitioner and the small firm. So those 7 recommendations were what were passed on to the board, and I'm happy to see that President Malika last year started to act on one, and I encourage the Small Firm Roundtable to aggressively address the other potential recommendations as well as the ones that you all will come up with that are better than the ones the task force came up with. And the final thing I would leave with was the final general comment the task force offered to the AIA board, and that was that for the purposes of organizing the AIA to better deliver services to its members, we've always thought of the firm as having, we thought that the organization of the AIA should be along 3 lines, that there are large firms, there are small firms, and there are sole practitioners. That the concept of a medium-sized firm was a vehicle that we couldn't find as we looked through the material that the task force was involved in. So we thought that perhaps the Institute ought to rethink itself in terms of what it wants, how it views its constituent members and what their specific definitions are. So with that, the task force attempted to define what a small firm is. It listed 5 sets of tools that we thought were worthy of investigation as ways to better serve that type of firm with the Institute, and it made 7 specific recommendations. And I hope that overview will be of some value to the rest of this discussion and to the ongoing work of the Small Firm Roundtable. And I wish Jeff and Jane and everybody else involved in that every success.